The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room in the known universe. It sat at the center of Station Prime, a massive space station that floated between 3 different star systems. The chamber was built from white stone that came from a dead planet. The ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Representatives from 217 species sat in floating chairs arranged in a great circle. Today, they were here to judge the newest species to reach the stars. Humans. Ambassador Gina walked into the chamber with steady steps. She was a small woman with black hair tied behind her head. Her face showed nothing but calm politeness. She had practiced this expression for many years. Behind her walked Captain Tejo, a tall man with broad shoulders and serious eyes. Next to him was Lieutenant Hannah, a young woman who moved like water, smooth and careful. None of them carried weapons. This was a choice, not a requirement. The floating chairs turned toward them. Hundreds of alien eyes watched. Some of these beings had scales. Some had fur. Some had no faces at all, just smooth surfaces that somehow still managed to look down on the humans with judgment. High Counselor Bryn of the Eldari sat in the highest chair. The Eldari were an old species. They had thin bodies and large heads. Their skin was pale blue, and their eyes were completely black. Bryn had led the council for 300 years. He had seen many species come before this chamber. Most of them were either useful or dangerous. He needed to decide which category humans belonged to. "You may speak," Bryn said. His voice echoed through the chamber. Gina bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, High Counselor. On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I bring greetings. We come in peace. We seek friendship, trade, and shared knowledge." A sound rippled through the chamber. It took Gina a moment to realize it was laughter. The Torvan representative leaned forward in his chair. The Torvans were large beings, covered in thick gray plates, like living armor. Their eyes were red and small. Their mouths were full of teeth meant for tearing. Ambassador Growth was one of the largest Torvans Gina had ever seen. "Peace," Growth repeated. His translator made the word sound like a joke. "We have studied your species, human. We know what you are." Gina kept her polite smile. "And what are we?" "Cowards." The word hung in the air. Behind Gina, she felt Tejo shift his weight slightly. Hannah's fingers moved toward her hip, where her weapon would normally rest. But there was nothing there. Gruth continued. 30 of your years ago, your species entered our region of space. The Voron Empire demanded tribute from your colonies. You moved your people to different worlds rather than fight. We relocated to avoid unnecessary conflict, Gina said calmly. When the Keth Dominion raided your trade ships, you paid them. You gave them money and goods to leave you alone. We negotiated a peaceful solution. Growth showed his teeth. It was not a smile. When the Brel attacked your science station near the Outer Rim, you did not strike back. You sent doctors to help their sick instead. Doctors, to enemies who had killed your people. Gina nodded. The Brel were suffering from a plague. We had medicine that could help. We chose to save lives, rather than end them. The chamber erupted in noise. Different species spoke in different languages. Translators hummed and clicked, trying to keep up. The general feeling was clear: amusement and contempt. High Counselor Bryn raised one thin hand. The chamber fell silent. We have reviewed your history in great detail, Bryn said. Your species has files upon files about something you call war. Your home planet is covered with monuments to the dead. You build great structures just to remind yourselves of old battles. He tilted his head, studying Gina like a scientist studying an insect. Why would a species build monuments to things it fears? Gina's smile did not change. Perhaps to remember fear, to remember many things, High Counselor. Bryn looked at his fellow council members. The Eldari beside him whispered something. The Torvan representative, Growth, made a gesture that his translator identified as dismissal. We have made our assessment, Bryn announced. The species known as humanity is hereby classified as non-threat species. Category 7. Pacifist, submissive. They pose no danger to any member of the Galactic Council. They may be useful for labor, medicine, and scientific research. They are not to be considered for military alliance or defense treaties. Gina bowed her head again. We understand, High Counselor. You may go. The three humans turned and walked out of the chamber. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every alien in the room watched them leave. When the great doors closed behind them, Tejo finally spoke. His voice was low and tight. They called us cowards. Yes, Gina said. They said we would make good slaves. I heard. Hana looked at her empty holster. They have no idea what they're talking about. Gina walked in silence for a moment. The corridor outside the chamber was long and white. Their ship waited at the end, ready to take them back to Earth with news of humanity's classification. They read our history, Gina said quietly. But they did not understand it. Tejo frowned. What do you mean? They saw our memorials. They saw our museums and our monuments. They saw that we build great walls and statues to remember our wars. Gina stopped walking. She turned to face her two companions. They thought we built them because we are afraid of war. Are we not? Hana asked. Gina's polite smile faded. For just a moment, something else showed in her eyes. Something old, something that had been passed down through generations of her family, through centuries of her people's history, something that had seen invasion, occupation, and division. Something that had never truly surrendered. We are afraid, Gina admitted, but not of war. Then what? Gina looked back at the closed chamber doors. Behind them, 200 species were laughing at humanity. They were making plans to use humans for labor. They were dismissing humans as weak and harmless. We are afraid of what we become when we stop being afraid, Gina said. We are afraid of ourselves. She turned and continued walking toward their ship. The Galactic Council thinks our memorials are proof of weakness. They think we build monuments because we lost, because we suffered, because we are scared. She shook her head slowly. They do not understand. We build memorials because we won. We won so completely, so terribly, that we needed to remind ourselves to never do it again. Tejo and Hana exchanged glances. What happens if someone forces us to fight? Tejo asked. Gina stepped onto their ship. The door began to close behind her. Then the galaxy will learn what our memorials really mean. The ship lifted off from Station Prime. It turned toward distant Earth, carrying 3 humans, and a new classification, Category 7. Pacifist submissive. The Galactic Council had no idea how wrong they were, but they would learn. New Busan was a farming colony on a small green world at the edge of human space. It had soft hills covered in rice fields. It had rivers that ran clear and cold. It had forests where children played and old people walked in the mornings. 40,000 humans lived there, and most of them had never seen a weapon fired in anger. Commander Dongwu ran the colony's defense garrison. It was a small building at the center of the main town, with 12 soldiers and a collection of old pulse rifles. The rifles were 15 years out of date. The soldiers were mostly young people who had joined because they wanted free education, not because they expected to fight. Dongwu was 53 years old. He had gray in his hair and lines on his face. He had served in the Earth Defense Force for 30 years, and in all that time, he had never fired a shot at another living being. This was normal for human soldiers. They trained constantly, but they never fought. There was never any need. On the morning that changed everything, Dongwu was drinking tea in his office. His tactical officer, Minho, was reviewing supply reports. His communications officer, Suji, was sending routine messages back to Earth. It was quiet. It was peaceful. Then the sky turned dark. Suji looked up from her console. Sir, I'm detecting multiple large objects entering orbit. Dongwu set down his tea. Identification. Suji's face went pale. Torvan. 17 warships. Sir, this is a full invasion fleet. Dongwu stood. He walked to the window and looked up. Through the blue sky, he could see dark shapes blocking the sun. They were massive, each one larger than the entire town. Get me a channel to the lead ship, he ordered. The Torvan admiral appeared on Dongwu's screen moments later. He was a huge creature, even for a Torvan. His gray plates were covered in marks that indicated high rank. His small red eyes showed amusement. "Human commander," the admiral said. "I am Admiral Growth of the Torvan Empire. You will surrender your population for processing. All humans will be transported to labor camps. Resistance will result in orbital bombardment. You have 1 hour." Dongwu stared at the screen. "Processing? Your species has been classified as suitable for labor. Your people will serve the Empire. This is not negotiable. What about the children?" Admiral Growth showed his teeth. "Children are easier to train. They will adapt to their new purpose quickly." Dongwu felt something cold move through his chest. It was not fear. Fear was what he had felt when he first saw the ships. This was something older, something darker, something that his grandmother had described in her stories about a different time, when foreign soldiers had marched through her village and taken everything. "I need to consult with my government," Dongwu said, keeping his voice steady. "You have 1 hour. At the end of that hour, we will begin landing troops. Any resistance will be crushed." The admiral leaned closer to the screen. "I have read your files, human. I know your species fears war. I know you always run, always pay, always surrender. This will be easy." The screen went dark. Minho was already at his console. "Sir, I'm pulling up evacuation routes. If we can get the population to the emergency shelters, we might be able to hold until..." "Until what?" Dongwu asked quietly. "Until they get bored and leave? They want slaves, Minho. They want our children." Suji looked up. "Sir, I'm encoding an emergency transmission to Earth. Help could arrive in 4 days. Maybe 3 if they push the engines. We don't have 4 days, we have 1 hour." Dongwu looked around his small command center. 12 soldiers. Old rifles. No heavy weapons. No air support. No reinforcements. Against 17 warships and thousands of troops. He thought about his daughter. She was 7 years old. She lived in the town center with his wife, in a small house near the school. She liked to catch frogs in the rice fields. She was afraid of loud noises. He thought about his grandmother's stories, about the occupation, about the comfort women and the forced labor, about the division of her homeland, about decades of struggle and pain. He thought about the memorials back on Earth, the ones that the Galactic Council had mocked, the ones they did not understand. "Suji," Dongwu said, "open a channel to the Torvan flagship." "Sir, do it." Admiral Growth appeared on screen again, looking annoyed. "You still have 47 minutes, human. Do not waste my time." Dongwu stood straight. His voice was calm and clear. "This is Commander Park Dongwu of the United Earth Defense Force. I am invoking emergency protocol. 7. Something flickered in Growth's eyes. "What is that?" "You have entered sovereign human space with hostile intent toward civilian populations, including minors. Per the Geneva Seoul Conventions, you are hereby warned. Any aggressive action will be considered an act of total war." Groth laughed. It was a harsh, grinding sound. "Total war? You have 12 soldiers and outdated weapons. We have 17 warships and 3,000 shock troops. Your threat is meaningless." "Perhaps," Dongwu said. "But I am required by law to give you this warning. You are choosing to harm human children. This is the line. This is where everything changes. Nothing will change. Your species fears war. You always have. You always will." Dongwu smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a man who had made peace with what was coming. "We do not fear war, Admiral. We fear what we become when we stop fearing it. And you just made us stop." He cut the transmission. 47 minutes later, Torvan landing craft descended through the atmosphere. They expected no resistance. They expected frightened farmers and crying children. What they found was something else. Dongwu had spent the hour preparing. The civilians were already moving toward evacuation shuttles hidden in the hills. The 12 soldiers had taken positions throughout the town, using the buildings and narrow streets to their advantage. They had set traps. They had created choke points. They had done everything they could with what they had. It was not enough to win. Dongwu knew that, but it might be enough to buy time. The first wave of Torvan troops entered the town square expecting surrender. Instead, They found pulse rifle fire from 3 different directions. The old weapons were not powerful, but they were accurate. The first 50 Torvans fell before they understood what was happening. Then the real fighting began. Dongwu fought from building to building, position to position. When one location became too dangerous, he moved to another. His soldiers did the same. They were not trying to defeat the Torvans, they were trying to slow them down. Every minute mattered. Every minute meant more evacuees reaching the shuttles. Every minute meant more children escaping. The battle lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of pulse, fire, and explosions. 6 hours of running and hiding and fighting again. 6 hours of watching his soldiers fall, one by one, until only 4 remained. Then 3, then 2. Minho died holding a choke point near the school. He took 11 Torvans with him. Suji was wounded in the 3rd hour but kept fighting until she could not stand. She survived, barely. By the end, Dongwu was alone in the ruins of his command center, surrounded by the bodies of enemies he had killed. His rifle was empty. His body was broken, but he was still alive, and in the hills beyond the town, the last evacuation shuttle lifted off. Every child made it off-world. When the Torvan admiral finally reached the command center, he found Dongwu sitting against the wall, breathing slowly, waiting. "You are insane," Growth said. 12 soldiers against 3,000. It was suicide. Dongwu looked up at him. His eyes were steady. "Check your numbers again, Admiral. How many of your troops are dead?" Groth hesitated. The reports were still coming in. The answer was disturbing. 437, he admitted. Dongwu smiled that terrible smile again. "That is the real warning. 12 humans held your army for 6 hours and killed 400 of you. Imagine what will happen when Earth sends its real soldiers." The Admiral stared at the broken human commander. For the first time in his life, he felt something he did not recognize. Fear. The message from New Busan reached Earth at 3:47 inches the morning, Seoul time. It was received by a young communications officer at the Global Defense Command. She read it 3 times, because she could not believe what it said. Then she woke her supervisor. Her supervisor woke the duty commander. The duty commander woke the president. By sunrise, the whole world knew. Torvans had attacked a human colony. They had come for slaves. They had come for children. 12 soldiers had fought to stop them. 8 of those soldiers were dead. The others were wounded or captured. Commander Dongwu was in Torvan custody. The news spread across every continent. People watched the videos on their screens. They saw the burning town. They saw the small garrison fighting against impossible odds. They saw the last evacuation shuttle escaping over the hills. For 30 years, humanity had been peaceful. They had built hospitals. They had shared technology. They had walked away from every conflict, chosen negotiation over violence, and buried their weapons in warehouses and forgotten bunkers. That ended at sunrise. Admiral Yoongi stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the chaos unfold through his tactical displays. He was 61 years old, with a shaved head and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war that never came. Most people thought his job was pointless. Most people thought the human military was a leftover from a more violent age. Those people were wrong. "Status report," Yoongi ordered. His executive officer, Commander Nari, stepped forward. She was tall and thin, with her hair cut short for combat efficiency. "All reserves have been activated. Mothballed ships are being brought online. The lunar shipyards are working at full capacity. What is our current strength? 3 dreadnoughts fully operational. 4 more will be ready within 48 hours. 8 cruisers. 22 destroyers. 47 fighter squadrons." Nari paused. "That was our strength 6 hours ago. It has changed since then." Yoongi turned to look at her. "Changed how?" "Civilian ships have been requesting military conversion. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, mining vessels. Their captains are volunteering their ships for weapons installation." She checked her data pad. "We have accepted 400 applications so far. More are coming every hour." Yoongi nodded slowly. He was not surprised. He had been expecting this. Through the window of his bridge, he could see the orbital shipyards of Luna. Usually, they built colony ships and research vessels. Today, they were building weapons, Great cannons were being attached to hulls. Missile systems were being installed. Armor plating was being welded onto civilian transports. It should have taken months. It was happening in hours. "Sir," another officer called out, "we are receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Put it through." The screen flickered, and High Counselor Bryn appeared. The Eldari looked uncomfortable. His dark eyes shifted nervously. "Admiral Jungi," Bryn said, "the Galactic Council is aware of the incident at your colony. We wish to express our concern." "Concern," Jungi repeated. "The Torvan Empire is a member of the Council. This incident should be resolved through diplomatic channels. We urge humanity to remain calm and allow the Council to mediate." "Mediate." Jungi's voice was flat. "The Torvans attacked our civilians. They tried to enslave our children. They killed our soldiers. These are serious accusations. The Council will investigate. There is nothing to investigate. We have video evidence. We have survivor testimony. We have the bodies of our dead." Jungi stepped closer to the screen. "Your Council classified humanity as pacifist submissive. You told the Torvans that we were harmless. You gave them permission to treat us like cattle." Bryn's pale blue skin turned slightly gray. "The Council does not control the actions of individual member species. We cannot be held responsible." "I am not holding you responsible, High Counselor. Not yet." Jungi turned away. "This transmission is over." The screen went dark. Nari watched her admiral carefully. "Sir, the Council could become a problem. If they side with the Torvans, they will not." "How can you be certain?" Jungi walked to the main window and looked out at the growing fleet. Ships were arriving from every corner of human space. Military vessels, converted civilians, even private craft with makeshift weapons. "Do you know why humans stopped fighting?" "Commander, we evolved beyond violence, sir. We learned that cooperation was more valuable than conflict." Jungi shook his head. "That is what we tell ourselves. That is what we tell our children. But it is not the truth." He turned to face her. "We stopped fighting because we became too good at it. In our last great war, we killed 80 million of our own kind. We burned entire cities. We split the atom and used it to destroy 2 population centers in seconds. We developed weapons that could end all life on our planet." Nari said nothing. She had learned these facts in school, but they had always seemed distant, historical. After that war, we looked at what we had become. We looked at the bodies and the ruins and the poison in the air, and we were horrified. Jungi's voice grew quiet. "We made a choice. We decided to bury our weapons. We decided to build instead of destroy. We decided to be peaceful, not because we were weak, but because we knew our strength too well. And now?" Jungi looked back at the fleet. "Now someone has forced us to remember, across human space." The awakening continued. Veterans who had never seen combat reported to their old units. Engineers who had designed peaceful machines began designing weapons again. Scientists who had studied medicine began studying more efficient ways to cause harm. It was not anger. It was something colder. Something more focused. Something that had been sleeping for generations and was now opening its eyes. The permission requests began arriving at the office of the president within 12 hours of the attack. Every colony, every station, every ship that had a vote in human government was asked the same question. "Do we respond with force?" The answer was unanimous. Yes. Admiral Jungi received the authorization personally. He read it on his screen, then looked up at his bridge crew. "Inform all ships," he said. "We move in 6 hours." Nari hesitated. "Sir, the Torvan Empire has never been defeated. They have conquered 11 species. Their military is 10 times our size." "I know. Our people have not fought a real war in over a century. We are untested." "I know that too. Then how can we possibly win?" Jungi smiled. It was the same smile that Dongwu had worn. The same smile that their ancestors had worn on frozen mountains and burning beaches. The smile of humans who had decided that some things were worth any cost. "Commander, we do not need to match their size. We do not need to match their experience. We only need to remind them of one thing." "What is that, sir?" "That humanity did not stop fighting because we lost." Jungi turned to face his crew. We stopped because we won so completely that it terrified us. The Torvans have never faced an enemy like us. They have never fought a species that conquered itself. They have never seen what happens when you give humans permission to stop being afraid. He looked out at his fleet one last time. 16 dreadnoughts now. More coming every hour. Thousands of converted ships. Millions of volunteers. They wanted to see what humans are capable of. Now they will learn. The fleet began to move toward Torvan space. The Torvan homeworld was called Grath. It was a large planet with heavy gravity and thick gray clouds that never cleared. The Torvans had ruled it for 800 years. They had built great cities of black stone and metal. They had created the most powerful military in their region of the galaxy. They had conquered 11 other species and made them servants. No enemy had ever reached Grath. No enemy had ever dared to try, until now. Admiral Groth stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching his tactical displays with growing concern. The human fleet had crossed into Torvan space 14 hours ago. It should not have been possible. The Torvan border patrols were the most advanced in the galaxy. How did they get through? Groth demanded. His tactical officer looked nervous. We do not know. Admiral, our patrols are not responding. All 36 stations have gone silent. Destroyed. We cannot confirm. The humans are jamming our communications. We have never encountered jamming this effective. Groth gripped the railing of his platform. He thought about the human commander on New Busan, the one who had smiled at him, the one who had warned him. He had not believed the warning. He believed it now. How many ships do they have? Unknown, Admiral. Our sensors are being confused by something. We are detecting anywhere from 100 to 10,000 vessels. That is impossible. Their fleet was small. They had no warships. They have warships now, Admiral. The first human vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Grath's system. It was the Indomitable, Admiral Jungi's flagship. It was followed by 15 other dreadnoughts. Then came the cruisers, the destroyers, the converted civilian ships. Then came the fighters. Wave after wave of small craft that poured out of carrier bays like angry insects. The Torvan defense fleet was waiting for them. 200 warships. The largest gathering of military power in Torvan history. Admiral Jungi studied the enemy formation on his tactical display. Analysis? Commander Nari stood beside him, her voice steady. They are using a standard defensive formation. Their heavy ships are in the center, lighter vessels on the flanks. They expect us to attack their center and try to break through. That is what most species would do. Yes, sir. Jungi nodded slowly. Then we will not do that. Signal all ships. Execute Pattern 17. The human fleet split apart. Torvan commanders watched in confusion as the enemy vessels scattered in seemingly random directions. Some dove toward the planet's gravity well. Some looped around to attack from behind. Some simply stopped moving and waited. What are they doing? Groth demanded. No one could answer him. Then the attack began. Human pilots flew their fighters through impossible maneuvers. They skimmed along the surface of Torvan capital ships, too close for the big guns to track them. They fired missiles at point-blank range and then pulled away at speeds that should have killed them from the acceleration alone. Human gunners targeted weak points that should not have been visible. Power conduits, sensor arrays, engine manifolds. Every shot seemed to find a critical system. Human cruisers worked in pairs and groups of 3, covering each other with overlapping fields of fire. When one ship was damaged, another would move in front to shield it while it made repairs. And the converted civilian ships, the cargo haulers and mining vessels that the Torvans had dismissed as worthless, proved to be something else entirely. Their civilian engines were actually faster than military designs. Their cargo holds had been converted into massive weapon bays. Their crews were volunteers who fought with desperate fury. Within the first hour, the Torvan fleet lost 47 ships. Admiral Groth could not understand what he was seeing. The humans were not fighting like any species he had encountered. They were not cautious. They were not predictable. They took risks that seemed insane, but somehow they worked. Their pilots are performing suicide runs, his tactical officer reported. They are crashing into our ships. Wait. No. They are ejecting at the last moment. They are being recovered by friendly vessels. That is impossible. The timing would have to be perfect. It is perfect, Admiral. In the command center of the Indomitable, Admiral Jungi watched the battle unfold with quiet satisfaction. His people were performing exactly as he had expected. They were fighting like humans. Sir, Nari reported. The Torvan center is collapsing. Their flanks are trying to regroup. But we have them surrounded. Casualties, 22 ships destroyed. 64 damaged but functional. Crew losses are still being calculated. Jungi closed his eyes for a moment. 22 ships, thousands of people. Each one a human being with a family, a history, a future that would now never happen. This was the cost. This was what humans had tried to forget. Continue the attack, he ordered. We do not stop until their fleet is eliminated. The battle raged for 9 hours. Colonel Jaewon led the ground assault on Grath itself. His forces landed on the outskirts of the capital city, outnumbered 8-1 by the Torvan defenders. It should have been impossible. Jaewon did not believe in impossible. His sergeant, Unbi, reported to him as they advanced through the ruined streets. Sir, they are bringing up heavy armor. Tanks and walking machines. How many? 12 tanks, 6 walkers, more than we can handle. Jaewon looked at his remaining soldiers. Tired. Wounded. Still fighting. What is our objective? The Torvan High Command building, sir. 2 kilometers north. If we can capture it, we can force their leadership to negotiate. Then we go north. Sir, our retreat route is cut off. If we push forward, then we cannot retreat. We can only go forward. Jaewon checked his weapon. This is what we trained for, Sergeant. This is what our ancestors did. They faced impossible odds, and they kept going. They did not stop because the enemy was stronger. They did not stop because the cost was high. They stopped only when the job was done. Unbi looked at him. She was young, only 23 years old. She had joined the military because she wanted to travel between stars. She had never expected to fight, but she was human. And humans did not give up. Yes, sir, she said. Forward. They went forward. The fighting in the streets of the Torvan capital was brutal. Human soldiers moved from building to building, using every piece of cover, every shadow, every moment of surprise. They fought with rifles and grenades and, when necessary, with their hands. The Torvans had expected them to surrender. They had expected the humans to see the heavy armor and the walking machines and realize that victory was impossible. They had expected fear. What they got was something else. Jaewon lost half his forces in the first kilometer. He did not slow down. He lost another quarter in the second kilometer. He kept pushing. When he finally reached the high command building, he had 32 soldiers left out of the 300 he had started with. They were wounded, exhausted, and running low on ammunition, but they were there. Breach the doors, Jaewon ordered. They breached the doors. Inside, they found the Torvan High Council, surrounded by their last bodyguards. The council members stared at the humans with something that looked like disbelief. You cannot be here, the council leader said. Your armies are surrendering, Jaewon said. Your fleet is destroyed. Your admiral is dead. And you are looking at the reason why. He stepped forward. Blood dripped from a wound on his head. His uniform was torn and burned. He looked like death itself. The Galactic Council called us cowards, Jaewon said. They called us pacifist, submissive. They said we feared war. He smiled. The same terrible smile that all humans wore when they had stopped being afraid. We do fear war. But not because we are weak. We fear it because we know what we are capable of. We fear the monster that lives inside every human being. We fear the part of us that conquered our own planet, killed millions of our own kind, and built weapons that could destroy worlds. He raised his rifle and pointed it at the council leader. You woke that monster. You threatened our children. And now you have seen what happens when humans stop trying to be better. The council leader looked at the human soldiers. He looked at the bodies of his bodyguards. He looked at the reports streaming in from across his empire. Reports of defeat after defeat, loss after loss. The Torvan Empire had never lost a war. Until now. What do you want? The council leader asked. Jaewon lowered his rifle. We want you to surrender. We want you to release all human prisoners. We want you to pay reparations to the families of those you killed. And we want you to understand something. What? This was not our full strength. This was not our maximum effort. This was simply what happened when you gave us a reason to fight. Jaewon turned to look at his surviving soldiers. Remember this day. Remember that you forced humans to remember what they are. And pray that you never have to see what we would become if you did it again. The council leader surrendered. The war was over. 1 month after the fall of the Torvan Empire, the Galactic Council met again. The great chamber on Station Prime was silent in a way it had never been before. 217 species sat in their floating chairs. But no one spoke. No one laughed. No one made dismissive gestures or whispered jokes about the newcomers. They were all watching the doors. Ambassador Gina walked into the chamber with steady steps. Her black hair was still tied behind her head. Her face still showed calm politeness. But something had changed. Everyone could feel it. Behind her walked Captain Teo. His holster was no longer empty. The weapon at his hip was a military-grade pulse pistol, fully charged and ready to fire. No one on the council objected. Next to him was Commander Hana. She had been a lieutenant during their last visit. She had been promoted for her actions during the war, when she had commanded a destroyer that held the evacuation fleet safe from 3 Torvan cruisers. Her ship had been destroyed. She had kept fighting from an escape pod until rescue arrived. The 3 humans walked to the center of the chamber and stopped. High Counselor Bryn looked down at them from his elevated chair. His dark eyes were careful. His thin hands were folded together. He had not slept well since the war ended. None of the council members had. Ambassador Gina, Bryn said. His voice echoed in the silence. The Galactic Council thanks you for accepting our invitation. It was not exactly an invitation, High Counselor. It was a summons. Bryn's pale blue skin flushed slightly. Yes. Well, the council wishes to discuss recent events. The war, you mean? Yes, Gina nodded. Then discuss. The Eldari ambassador next to Bryn leaned forward. His voice trembled as he spoke. We have reviewed the records of the conflict. We have studied your tactics, your weapons, your behavior in combat. He paused. We do not understand what we have seen. What specifically do you not understand? Your species was classified as pacifist submissive. You had no military tradition. You had avoided every conflict for 30 years. Your soldiers were untrained. Your ships were outdated or converted from civilian designs. The Eldari shook his head. You should have been destroyed in the first engagement. Instead, you eliminated the Torvan fleet in 9 hours and conquered their homeworld in 6 days. Yes, Gina said simply. We did. How? Gina was quiet for a moment. She looked around the chamber at all the alien faces watching her. Some of them showed fear. Some showed confusion. A few showed something that might have been respect. You made a mistake, she said finally. You looked at our history and saw our monuments and memorials. You saw that we had stopped fighting each other. You concluded that we had become weak. That was the logical conclusion. The Eldari said. No, it was the wrong conclusion. You did not understand what those memorials meant. Captain Tejo stepped forward. His hand rested on his weapon, not in threat, but in readiness. I would like to explain, if I may. Bryn nodded slowly. 300 years ago my ancestors lived in a small country on our planet, Tejo said. That country was invaded. The people were enslaved. Their culture was nearly destroyed. But they did not give up. They fought for decades. They suffered greatly, and eventually, they were free. He looked around the chamber. That is just one story from one small part of our world. Every nation on Earth has similar stories. We have fought each other for thousands of years. We have developed weapons of terrible power. We have killed millions of our own kind in wars that lasted decades. That is exactly why we classified you as we did. The Torvan representative said. He was a new one, replacing Admiral Growth who had died in the battle. A species that fights itself so viciously is clearly unstable and dangerous to itself. Such species usually destroy themselves before they can become a threat to others. But we did not destroy ourselves, Gina said. We stopped. Yes. But why? How? Commander Hannah answered. Because we finally realized what we were. We looked at the bodies and the burned cities and the weapons that could kill everyone. And we were horrified. Not by war, by ourselves. She stepped forward, and several council members leaned back in their chairs. We are not peaceful because we are gentle. We are not kind because we are weak. We chose to be peaceful. We chose to be kind. We made that choice every single day for 100 years. Because we knew what would happen if we stopped choosing. And then the Torvans attacked your children. Bryn said quietly, yes. And we stopped choosing. The chamber was silent. Finally, the Keth Dominion representative spoke. The Keth were insectoid beings with many legs and clicking voices. They had raided human ships for years, taking advantage of humanity's peaceful policies. What do humans want now? The Keth asked. Revenge? Conquest? You have proven your strength. What will you do with it? Gina turned to face the Keth directly. The representative flinched slightly. We want what we have always wanted, Gina said. Peace, trade, cooperation. We want to build hospitals and share technology. We want our children to grow up looking at stars with wonder, not with fear. How can we believe that? You just destroyed the most powerful military in our region of space. Yes. And then we stopped. We did not destroy the Torvan species. We did not enslave their population. We did not take their worlds. We defeated them, and then we helped them rebuild. This was true. In the weeks since the war ended, human aid ships had been arriving at Torvan worlds. Doctors were treating the wounded. Engineers were repairing damaged infrastructure. Teachers were helping Torvan children understand what had happened and how to move forward. It made no sense to most of the council. Victors did not help the defeated. That was not how the galaxy worked. We do not understand, the Eldari ambassador said. Why would you help them after what they did? Gina smiled. It was not the terrible smile that humans wore in battle. It was the real smile. The one that showed kindness and warmth, because that is who we choose to be. The war is over. The Torvans are no longer a threat. Now we must help them heal, so that they can become something better. That is what we do. That is what we have always done, even with ourselves. She turned to face High Counselor Bryn. We build memorials to remember our wars, but we do not build them to celebrate victory. We build them to remember the cost. We build them so that every generation understands what happens when we stop trying to be good. She paused. The Galactic Council classified humanity as pacifist submissive because we ran from fights and paid ransoms and chose peace over war. You thought we were afraid, were you not? We were terrified, Gina admitted, but not of our enemies. We were terrified of ourselves. We knew what we could become. We knew the darkness that lives in every human heart, and we spent a century learning to control it. Commander Hanna stepped forward again. The Torvans asked what would happen if they fought humans. Now they know. Now everyone knows. We do not want to fight. We will do almost anything to avoid fighting. But if you threaten our children, if you attack our families, if you leave us no choice, she looked around the chamber one last time, then we will remind the galaxy why we built those memorials in the first place. High Counselor Bryn was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to his fellow council members. I move to reclassify the human species. All in favor? Every hand, claw, tentacle, and appendage in the chamber rose. Bryn turned back to the humans. The species known as humanity is hereby reclassified as threat level absolute. Status: valued ally. Official recommendation: do not provoke under any circumstances. Gina bowed her head slightly. We appreciate the recognition, High Counselor. What will you do now, Ambassador? Gina looked at Tejo and Hanna. They both nodded. We will go home, she said. We will hug our families and visit our memorials. We will plant flowers and teach our children and build new things. We will be peaceful again. Until someone gives us a reason not to be. We hope that never happens. She smiled once more. But if it does, we will be ready. The three humans turned and walked out of the chamber. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. Every alien in the room watched them leave. When the doors closed, no one spoke for a very long time. Far away, on a small blue planet called Earth, children placed flowers at granite monuments. They did not fully understand what the names carved there meant. They did not know the stories of the people who had died, or the battles they had fought, or the choices they had made, but they knew the words engraved at the base of every memorial. We remember, so that we may remain who we choose to be, not who war would make us. And in the stars above, a fleet of ships returned home. Soldiers hugged their families. Pilots told their stories. Commanders wrote reports that would be studied for generations. Humanity had proven itself. The galaxy knew what humans could do. Now it was time to show them what humans chose to do instead: build, heal, grow, dream, and never, ever forget.